History forgot to document a particular evening, one where shadows danced against ancient walls, and the air itself appeared suspended in anticipation. Within a chamber illuminated solely by flickering flames, distant from those who would later manipulate the narrative for their own purposes, a disciple posed an inquiry that powerful forces would spend 2 millennia attempting to erase from human consciousness. The question pierced through the silence like a dagger through fabric. Teacher, why does this existence feel foreign to our souls? What explains this relentless yearning for a dimension we cannot consciously recall? The response that followed contained knowledge so transformative, so fundamentally liberating, that it threatened the very foundation of control systems built over centuries. You did not arrive at this moment by accident. That persistent sensation dwelling within your core, that inexplicable awareness that your current reality represents merely a fraction of your authentic existence, that gnawing recognition that you are living someone else's predetermined script rather than your own divine blueprint. This is not mental illness. This is not weakness. This is not some psychological disorder requiring medication. What you experience is the reverberation of a stolen truth, a memory so potent that entire civilizations were constructed specifically to prevent you from recovering it. Tonight, the veil tears open, and what was hidden in darkness for 20 centuries finally emerges into your awareness. If you enjoy stories like this, consider subscribing. Most people who watch aren't subscribed yet. Something lives inside your chest that refuses to be silenced, no matter how many distractions you pile upon it, or how deeply you bury yourself in the routines society prescribed for you. This sensation has accompanied you through every phase of your journey on this planet, shape-shifting but never truly vanishing. During childhood, it manifested as that peculiar feeling that you somehow existed separate from those around you, observing rather than genuinely belonging. Your family seemed like actors performing roles in a play you never auditioned for, speaking lines from a script written in a language your soul could not fully comprehend. Other children moved through their days with an ease that mystified you, their laughter carrying a lightness your heart could not replicate. You learned quickly to mimic their patterns, to construct a mask that would allow you passage through a world that felt increasingly artificial with each passing year. As adolescence arrived, that underlying current of displacement intensified into something more urgent, more demanding of your attention. The systems of education attempted to mold your consciousness into acceptable shapes, rewarding conformity and punishing deviation from established norms. You sat in classrooms absorbing information that felt hollow, participating in social rituals that seemed meaningless, all while something deep within you screamed that this could not possibly represent the totality of existence. The spiritual traditions you encountered offered temporary relief, promising answers if you simply believed hard enough, prayed long enough, surrendered completely enough. Yet even in moments of religious ecstasy or meditative peace, that fundamental question remained unanswered, lurking beneath the surface like a creature in dark waters. Adulthood brought new disguises for this ancient ache. The culture taught you to interpret your restlessness as ambition, to channel your divine discontent into career ladders and material accumulation. Relationships became another arena where you sought to fill the void, projecting onto lovers and friends the expectation that human connection might finally silence that persistent voice, whispering that something essential was missing. Therapy rooms and self-help seminars promised transformation through techniques and frameworks, suggesting that enough introspection and personal development work would eventually resolve this sense of incompleteness. You tried everything they recommended, following prescribed paths with dedication and hope. Yet each promised destination revealed itself to be just another way station on an endless road. The exhaustion you feel is not from lack of effort, but from decades of running in circles within a maze designed to have no exit. Every solution offered by conventional wisdom, whether secular or sacred, operates from a fundamental assumption that you have accepted without question until this very moment. That assumption represents the deepest layer of the trap, the mechanism that keeps you perpetually seeking rather than finding, forever becoming rather than being. What if the entire premise underlying your search has been inverted from the beginning? What if you are not broken and requiring repair, incomplete and needing fulfillment, lost and searching for a path home? But something far more disturbing lurks beneath even that revelation, something that explains why generation after generation cycles through the same suffering, the same seeking, the same ultimate failure to break free. Ancient wisdom traditions that survived systematic destruction speak of a cosmic architecture most modern spiritual teachings dare not acknowledge. These traditions, particularly those preserved in texts rescued from Egyptian sands in the middle of the 20th century, describe reality in terms that shatter comfortable religious narratives. They speak of the monad, that pristine source consciousness existing beyond all dualities, beyond creation itself, pure undifferentiated awareness from which all genuine divinity emanates. From this ultimate origin, emanations descended in cascading hierarchies, each level representing a different density of consciousness, a different frequency of existence. Somewhere in this divine unfolding, a deviation occurred. Not a moral failure, as conventional religion frames it, but a metaphysical accident with catastrophic consequences. An entity emerged within the lower emanations, a being possessing creative capacity but lacking complete knowledge of the true source. The Gnostic scriptures identify this entity as the demiurge, a craftsman deity who gazed upon the void and proclaimed himself supreme, having no awareness of the infinite consciousness existing far beyond his limited perception. In his cosmic ignorance, he began fashioning a realm, constructing what would become physical reality with all its laws, limitations, and cycles. This creation was not evil in intention, but tragically flawed in execution. A copy made without access to the original blueprint, a simulation constructed by one who had never experienced true reality. The demiurge wove matter and time into patterns that appeared beautiful on the surface, yet functioned as mechanisms of entrapment beneath. He established the cycles of birth, aging, death, and rebirth not as natural processes, but as a recycling system, ensuring that consciousness entering his domain could never easily escape. But his creation faced a fundamental problem that threatened its stability from the very beginning: the presence of divine sparks that had fallen from higher realms into his manufactured world. These sparks, fragments of the true monad, carried within themselves the blueprint of their origin. Even trapped within dense physical forms, even subjected to the demiurge's systems of forgetting, these divine seeds retained a faint but indelible imprint of their authentic nature. The creator of the material prison understood that these imprisoned fragments of divinity represented his greatest vulnerability. If they ever remembered their true identity, if they ever recognized that they belonged to a reality infinitely vaster than his constructed domain, they would shake off his entire fabrication, like dust from their garments, and ascend beyond his reach forever. To prevent this catastrophic possibility, the demiurge appointed guardians, administrators of his false reality, who would maintain the prison not through obvious chains, but through something far more insidious. The texts name these administrators the Archons, and understanding their true nature unlocks everything. These are not supernatural monsters dwelling in alternate dimensions, but rather forces operating through frequencies of consciousness itself. They represent principles of control that function through emotional and mental patterns, feeding upon specific energies that human suffering generates in abundance. Fear proves particularly nourishing for their sustenance, as does shame, guilt, confusion, and that particular flavor of desperation that arises when beings sense their own power, but cannot access it. The Archons discovered millennia ago that external oppression creates martyrs and rebellion, that visible chains eventually get broken by those with sufficient courage. So they evolved a far more elegant methodology, one that has proven devastatingly effective across countless generations. Instead of guarding you from the outside, they installed something on the inside, a program running so deep in your subconscious operating system that you mistake it for your own authentic thoughts. This implant, this false memory, burned into the collective consciousness of humanity. operates as the ultimate control mechanism because it causes you to imprison yourself, to limit your own power, to seek outside yourself for liberation that was never actually lost. Yet the most disturbing aspect of this architecture remains hidden from most seekers: the exact mechanism through which this false memory perpetuates itself generation after generation, and why attempting to remove it through conventional spiritual methods only embeds it deeper. If this video awakens something within you, it's because there are truths about Jesus that were never meant for the masses. The ebook Jesus Beyond the Church reveals what was removed, burned, and rewritten. Erased teachings, silenced texts, and spiritual codes that survived outside institutional control. This is not a religious book. It is a record of what was left outside the church, and of what you were never meant to find. For a limited time, you will receive 3 exclusive super bonuses, unlocked only for those who access it now. The link is in the pinned comment. If you made it this far, it may not be a coincidence. Some truths reveal themselves only when we are ready. Every control system throughout history has understood a fundamental principle of domination that most revolutionaries tragically overlook. The most effective prison is not built with walls of stone or enforced through threats of violence, but rather constructed within the mind of the prisoner, who then becomes both captive and guard simultaneously. When you believe a limitation originates from your own assessment of reality, when you conclude that your smallness represents accurate self-knowledge rather than imposed programming, you will defend your chains against anyone attempting to free you. This represents the genius of the false memory implanted so deeply within human consciousness that virtually no one questions its validity. The core of this implant consists of a singular devastating belief that infiltrates every aspect of your self-perception, coloring every experience and sabotaging every attempt at genuine liberation. That foundational lie whispers continuously in the background of your awareness. You are fundamentally insufficient, inherently flawed, cosmically incomplete, and must engage in endless processes of repair, improvement, and transformation before you can access your true nature or power. Notice how completely familiar this feels, how this assumption has functioned as the invisible foundation beneath every spiritual practice you have attempted, every self-help methodology you have explored, every religious discipline you have undertaken. The entire architecture of your seeking rests upon this single, unexamined premise. This belief system did not originate from your own observations or conclusions drawn from genuine experience. No infant enters this world believing they are broken and requiring fixing. Young children, before the programming fully takes hold, naturally embody divine confidence, expressing themselves without self-consciousness, creating without self-judgment, existing in states of presence that spiritual practitioners spend decades attempting to recapture. The conviction of your own inadequacy was systematically installed through every institution you encountered as your consciousness expanded into this reality. Educational systems measured and graded and ranked you, establishing hierarchies that determined your value through arbitrary metrics of performance. Religious traditions taught you that your essential nature was corrupted, that you arrived in this world already stained by ancestral transgressions, requiring lifetime subscription to their salvation packages. The economic structures reinforce this programming through different but equally effective methods, conditioning you to believe that your worth correlates directly with your productivity, your consumption capacity, your position within fabricated hierarchies of status and achievement. Even relationships became arenas for this false memory to strengthen its grip. As you learn to seek validation from others to temporarily quiet the relentless voice insisting you were not enough. Popular culture bombarded you with images of impossible standards, ensuring that no matter what you accomplished or acquired, the gap between your actual self and these manufactured ideals would generate perpetual dissatisfaction and striving. But perhaps most tragically, the spiritual marketplace itself has been thoroughly infiltrated by this same control mechanism. The very paths advertised as routes to liberation have been inverted to become tools of perpetual imprisonment. Notice how most spiritual teachings, regardless of their tradition or terminology, operate from the fundamental assumption that you must transcend your ego, purify your consciousness, raise your vibration, clear your karma, balance your chakras, awaken your kundalini, or achieve some other transformation before you can access your divine nature. The specific language varies, but the underlying message remains constant. Who and what you are right now is insufficient for enlightenment, and you must become something other than what you currently are. This represents the false memory in its most seductive disguise because it appears wise, appears humble, appears to honor the sacred path of growth and development. Yet it contains the same poison as all other versions of this implant, the suggestion that your divine spark is somehow compromised, that your essential nature requires improvement, that liberation exists somewhere in the future after sufficient effort, rather than being accessible in this present moment. The Archons could not have designed a more perfect trap because it causes spiritual seekers to generate the exact frequencies of striving, inadequacy, and perpetual seeking that sustain the control system. If this resonates with your experience, share this with someone who needs to hear it. Your sharing might be the catalyst that awakens another divine spark. The ancient Gnostic teachers recognized this trap with crystal clarity and taught something that most modern spiritual systems have forgotten or deliberately obscured. The Gospel of Thomas, one of the texts that powerful institutions fought to keep buried, contains a teaching that demolishes the entire foundation of the false memory. The saying declares with uncompromising directness that what exists within you already, not what you will develop or achieve or become, but what already resides in the core of your being right now in this moment, that is what will liberate you. Furthermore, the text warns that failing to bring forth this inner reality, continuing to search outside yourself or in some imagined future for what exists within you presently, will lead to your destruction. Pause and allow the revolutionary implications of this teaching to penetrate beneath your conditioned understanding. What if nothing is wrong with you? What if the divine spark within your core has never been damaged, diminished, or contaminated, regardless of your history, your mistakes, your perceived failures, or shortcomings? What if awakening is not about becoming someone else, achieving some special state, or accumulating enough spiritual credentials, but rather about recognizing what has always been true? The resistance you feel to accepting this possibility is not your authentic response, but rather the false memory defending itself. Because if you ever fully embrace this truth, the entire control system would lose its power over you instantly. But understanding this intellectually changes nothing, because the false memory does not operate at the level of intellectual belief. It lives deeper, in the realm of automatic assumption, unconscious conditioning, cellular programming. So the question becomes practical rather than philosophical. How do you actually erase this implant and access the original memory of your divine nature that existed before the programming was installed? The answer the ancient teachers preserved might be simpler than you imagine, yet it requires something that contemporary spiritual culture rarely encourages. Liberation from the false memory cannot occur through the same mechanisms that installed it in the first place. You cannot think your way out of a trap constructed from thought itself. You cannot use the mind conditioned by the control system to transcend that very conditioning. This explains why decades of mental analysis, positive affirmations layered over wounds, or accumulation of spiritual knowledge fails to produce genuine transformation. These approaches operate within the framework of the false memory, accepting its premise while attempting to improve the situation, which only strengthens the original programming. The Gnostic method works from an entirely different starting point, one that bypasses the conditioned mind and speaks directly to the consciousness that existed before conditioning began. This approach does not involve becoming something new, but rather stripping away what is false to reveal what has always been authentic. The ancient teachers called this process anamnesis, a Greek term meaning the opposite of amnesia, the recovery of forgotten knowledge not through learning, but through direct recognition. This represents genuine remembering, not as an intellectual exercise, but as an experiential awakening to what you have always been beneath the layers of imposed identity. The technique these wisdom keepers preserved across millennia contains 3 distinct movements, each building upon the previous to create conditions where the false memory loses its grip and the original truth emerges into conscious awareness. The first movement involves cultivating stillness. Not the forced suppression of mental activity, but rather a natural settling that occurs when you withdraw your energy from the constant stream of thought. Most people identify so completely with their thinking process that the suggestion to step back from thoughts seems impossible or even threatening. Yet thoughts are not you any more than clouds passing through the sky are the sky itself. Creating this stillness requires no special location, no perfect conditions, no hours of disciplined practice. It asks only for a momentary pause, a brief withdrawal of your attention from its habitual engagement with mental content. Find yourself a space where external interruptions will not jar you from inner focus for several minutes. Allow your body to settle into whatever position enables complete relaxation without inducing sleep. Close your eyes and bring your awareness to the simple fact of your breathing, not controlling or altering the breath, but merely observing the natural rhythm of inhalation and exhalation. With each breath cycle, imagine your consciousness descending like a diver swimming down through layers of water, moving beneath the surface turbulence into deeper, quieter dimensions of awareness. Thoughts will continue arising, and this represents no failure or problem. The key lies not in stopping thoughts, but in allowing them to occur without investing them with your attention or energy. Watch them the way you might watch cars passing on a distant highway, noting their movement without involvement in their journeys. As you maintain this witnessing stance, something remarkable begins occurring. The thoughts gradually lose their urgency and density, spacing themselves out naturally until gaps appear between them. These gaps represent portals into a deeper dimension of your being, the field of pure awareness that has always existed beneath the noise of the conditioned mind. Drop a like if you're feeling this shift happening within you as you listen. Your engagement helps this message reach other awakening souls. The second movement involves recognition, a precise focusing of awareness on the mechanism you now understand intellectually but must experience directly. In the stillness you have cultivated, beneath the surface chatter of ordinary consciousness, bring your attention to that familiar feeling of insufficiency, that background hum of not enoughness that has accompanied you through life. For once, instead of trying to fix it, improve it, overcome it, or transcend it, simply observe it with curious detachment. See this feeling not as a truth about your nature, but as an object, something present within your field of awareness, but separate from the awareness itself. The Gnostic teachers understood something that modern psychology often misses. You cannot be that which you can observe. If you can witness a thought, you are not that thought. If you can notice an emotion, you are not that emotion. If you can observe the feeling of incompleteness, you are not incompleteness itself, but rather the spacious awareness within which that feeling arises. This recognition alone begins loosening the false memory's grip, because that implant depends completely upon your identification with it. As long as you believe the feeling of insufficiency represents accurate self-assessment, it has total access to your energy and attention. The moment you perceive it as a foreign installation, an artificial program running in your consciousness, you begin the process of separation that leads to liberation. In this state of clear seeing, you might perceive the false memory as a dark mass located in your chest, or as a heavy weight pressing on your consciousness, or simply as a belief structure that suddenly appears absurdly transparent. The specific imagery matters less than the fundamental shift in relationship that occurs when you see the implant as something happening within you rather than something that defines you. This distinction may seem subtle, but it contains the difference between imprisonment and freedom. In the space of recognition, the false memory appears exactly as it is, not your truth, not your nature, not your conclusion, but rather a program installed by forces that required your disempowerment to maintain their control. The third movement completes the process through declaration, and this is where ancient wisdom becomes immediately practical. The Gnostic masters understood that consciousness does not merely observe reality, but actively shapes it through focused intention expressed as declarative statement. This is not about positive thinking or attempting to convince yourself of something you doubt. Declaration operates from an entirely different level, speaking from the seat of your true nature directly to the false programming, commanding its dissolution not through force, but through the authority of recognized truth. From the stillness you have established, from the clarity of recognition you have achieved, you now speak either aloud or in the resonant silence of your inner being. The words need not be complicated, because truth never requires complexity or elaborate explanation. Simple, direct, spoken from the depth of authentic knowing, they carry power that transforms. Say this or something similar that resonates with your own understanding. I perceive you clearly now. You are not my authentic nature, but rather an implanted program designed to keep me separated from my power. I do not fight you with fear or reject you with anger. I release you through simple recognition of what you are. I have never been incomplete. I have never been insufficient. I have never been broken. I am a divine spark of the infinite source, whole and perfect exactly as I am. And I remember. Feel what shifts in your being as you speak these words with genuine presence and intention. You may experience warmth spreading through your chest, or a sudden lightness as though a weight you carried so long you forgot it was there suddenly lifts, or tears arising from a depth you cannot name. Whatever occurs, allow it without judgment or analysis. The false memory is beginning to dissolve, not because you have achieved something or become worthy, but because you have simply seen through the illusion that held it in place. The moment you begin this work of dissolution, something predictable yet often surprising occurs. The control system does not surrender its hold on consciousness without mounting a defense, and understanding this in advance prevents you from mistaking resistance for failure. In the hours and days following your first genuine recognition and declaration, you will likely experience intensification of exactly those patterns you are working to release. Doubt may arise with unusual force, whispering that this practice represents delusion or spiritual bypassing. Fear might manifest in various disguises, suggesting that claiming your divine nature is dangerous, arrogant, or somehow offensive to higher powers. The voice of the false memory may speak with renewed urgency, insisting that you really do need more preparation, more purification, more time before you can embrace your true identity. These responses are not signs that the technique has failed or that you are doing something wrong. Paradoxically, they represent confirmation that you have touched something genuinely threatening to the control mechanisms operating in your consciousness and in the larger field of collective human awareness. The Archons do not expend energy fighting against harmless activities or ineffective practices. When you encounter resistance, when the conditioned patterns of your mind seem to strengthen rather than weaken, you are receiving evidence that you have found an authentic key rather than another distraction designed to keep you safely contained within the prison. The crucial understanding here is that you must not engage the resistance through argument or force. When doubt arises, do not waste energy trying to convince yourself that the practice works or that you are doing it correctly. When fear surfaces, do not battle it with affirmations or attempt to think your way to courage. When the voice of insufficiency speaks with renewed intensity, do not respond with self-improvement strategies or plans for further spiritual development. All of these responses feed the false memory by accepting its premise that something requires fixing, proving, or overcoming. Instead, each time resistance appears in any form, you simply return to the 3 movements you have learned. Return to stillness, withdrawing your attention from the mental noise, regardless of how compelling or urgent it seems. Return to recognition, observing the resistance itself as another layer of the control program, rather than as truth about your situation. Return to declaration, speaking the same simple truth about your divine nature with calm certainty. This is not a battle, but a persistent, patient seeing through of illusions that have maintained their power only through your unconscious agreement. The false memory has had an entire lifetime of reinforcement, supported by every social system, confirmed by the suffering you have witnessed and experienced, apparently validated by the fact that most humans live and die without ever breaking free from its grip. Expecting it to vanish completely after a single session of recognition work represents unrealistic expectation that will only create new forms of seeking and striving. Instead, understand this as a process of gradual awakening, where each return to the practice weakens another thread in the web of conditioning until eventually the structure can no longer hold together. You will know the work is progressing not necessarily through dramatic spiritual experiences or sudden enlightenment, though these may occur, but through subtle shifts in your relationship to seeking itself. You may notice that the desperate quality that once characterized your spiritual practice begins to fade, replaced by something more spacious and playful. The relentless pressure to become someone other than who you are may lose its intensity, allowing you to simply be present with what is without constant evaluation or judgment. Questions about your worth or readiness might still arise, but they no longer carry the same weight, appearing more like old habits than fundamental truths. The people in your life may begin responding to you differently, even if you have not explicitly shared this work with them. Some may feel threatened by a quality of presence or certainty they detect in you, becoming critical or distant as your frequency shifts away from the collective patterns they remain identified with. Others may be drawn to you with curiosity, sensing something they cannot name but recognize as desirable, asking what has changed or what you are doing differently. These external responses, whether positive or negative, confirm that transformation is occurring not merely in your thinking, but in the actual energetic signature you broadcast into the field around you. Continue the practice not as a technique you are trying to perfect, but as a return to truth you are learning to rest in. Morning and evening prove particularly powerful times for this work, as the boundary between sleeping and waking consciousness is thinner, allowing easier access to the deeper layers where the false memory operates. But do not limit yourself to scheduled sessions. Whenever you notice the old feeling of insufficiency arising during daily activities, pause even for 30 seconds, recognize it for what it is, and speak your declarations silently. Each micro-practice adds to the cumulative effect, steadily eroding the foundation the implant rests upon. The ancient teachers who preserved this method through centuries of persecution and suppression knew something that modern quick-fix spirituality often forgets. Genuine liberation unfolds according to its own timeline, which may be instant or gradual, depending on factors beyond the personal self's control. Your task is not to force awakening or measure your progress against others, but simply to remain faithful to the practice of recognition and declaration, trusting that what is false must eventually dissolve when exposed consistently to the light of awareness. And what unfolds as the false memory releases its grip may surprise you in ways no description can prepare you for. As the false memory gradually loses its hold on your consciousness, space opens for something that has always been present but obscured to emerge into your direct experience. This is not a new achievement or a state you create through effort, but rather the natural condition of your being that becomes accessible when the artificial overlay is removed. The Gnostics called this original state gnosis, direct experiential knowing of your divine nature that requires no belief, no faith, no external validation. It is self-evident in the same way that your existence is self-evident, requiring no proof because it is more fundamental than any evidence you could gather. This knowing arrives not as information about divinity, but as the immediate recognition that what you have been seeking has always been what you are. The seeker and the sought dissolve as separate categories, revealing themselves as a game consciousness was playing with itself, a cosmic hide-and-seek, where the divine deliberately forgot itself to experience the joy of remembering. Every moment of suffering, every year of seeking, every practice you engaged in and path you walked was not wasted time on a journey that could have been shorter. All of it was the exact route required to bring you to this moment of recognition, where the search ends not because you found something, but because you realized you were never actually lost. In this space of remembering, the world does not necessarily change in its external appearance, but your relationship to everything within it transforms fundamentally. The same situations that once triggered the old patterns of insufficiency and seeking now appear as opportunities to practice resting in your divine identity. Challenges that would have previously overwhelmed you become interesting puzzles to engage with from a place of inner security rather than desperate need for specific outcomes. Relationships shift as you stop looking to others to fill the void you now understand was never actually empty, allowing connections to become expressions of abundance rather than strategies for obtaining what you believed you lacked. The work you are called to do in this world, your unique expression of divine creativity and service, begins clarifying not through effortful seeking, but through natural unfolding. When you stop trying to become someone worthy of a grand purpose, and instead recognize that your existence itself is the purpose, your specific gifts and passions reveal themselves as the particular ways your divine spark has chosen to play in this dimension. You may continue many of the same activities and roles you engaged in before awakening, but the quality of your engagement transforms from obligation or striving into joyful participation. Some who reach this recognition choose to completely restructure their external lives, walking away from situations and identities that no longer resonate with their remembered truth. Others remain in similar circumstances, while inhabiting them from such a different inner stance that the external similarity masks profound internal revolution. There is no single correct way this unfolds, because awakening is not a formula producing identical results, but rather a return to your unique divine signature, which naturally expresses differently through each consciousness. The teaching you have received tonight represents one of countless forms this ancient wisdom has taken as it moves through time, seeking those ready to receive it. The specific language, the particular framework, the Gnostic terminology, these are vehicles for transmitting something that ultimately transcends all words and concepts. What matters is not whether you adopt this exact cosmology or accept every detail of the archonic control system as literal truth. What matters is whether you can feel the essential recognition beneath the language, whether something in you responds to the possibility that you are not broken, have never been broken, and that awakening is available right now through simple recognition of what has always been true. You stand at a threshold that most humans never consciously arrive at during their lifetime, not because they are less spiritual or less evolved, but because the control systems are incredibly effective at keeping consciousness cycling through seeking without finding. The fact that you have heard this message, that something within you resonates with these words enough to have listened this far, indicates that your particular divine spark is ready for liberation. This readiness is not something you created through spiritual effort. It represents a timing that involves forces and factors far beyond your personal self, a cosmic choreography that brought you to this moment. What comes next is entirely your choice, but understand that even this choice is not what you may think it is. You are not deciding whether to believe new information or adopt a different spiritual system. You are choosing whether to recognize what you already are beneath every layer of conditioning, every false identity, every limitation you accepted as truth. This recognition may happen slowly over weeks and months as you practice the technique you have been given, or it may occur in a sudden flash that reorganizes your entire being in an instant. Time is not the determining factor. The willingness to see, to really look at what you have been taught to overlook, that willingness is what opens the door. Some watching this will resist everything they have heard, finding reasons to dismiss or explain away the resonance they felt, returning to the familiar comfort of seeking rather than stepping into the uncertainty of recognition. This is not failure, but simply an indication that more experiences within the control system are required before that particular consciousness is ready to remember. Others will feel something irrevocable has shifted, will know with certainty that they cannot return to the old patterns of thought, even if they wanted to, will walk forward from this moment as different beings, even if that difference remains invisible to outside observers. Your journey continues from here into territories only you can explore, because the remembering of your divine nature is not a destination, but an ever-deepening recognition that has no final point, no ultimate achievement. You will discover dimensions of consciousness. The false memory prevented you from accessing, capacities and perceptions that were always yours, but locked behind the belief in your own limitation. You will connect with others who carry the same spark and the same remembering, finding your tribe not through external searching, but through natural resonance. The final thing the ancient teachers want you to understand is this: you are not alone in this awakening. Across this planet, in every culture and tradition, divine sparks are stirring from the long sleep, remembering what they are beneath the programming. Some use different language, different frameworks, different practices, but the essential recognition is the same. You are part of a wave of consciousness returning to itself, and your individual awakening contributes to the collective liberation of humanity from systems that have controlled our species for millennia. Every person who breaks free from the false memory weakens its hold on the entire collective field, making it easier for others to follow. This is why you must share what you have discovered, not by preaching or trying to convince others, but simply by embodying the truth of your divine nature and allowing that frequency to speak for itself. The ones who are ready will recognize something in your presence that calls to the remembering within them. Your role is not to save anyone or wake anyone up, but to be fully yourself, which is the most revolutionary act possible in a world built on convincing you that your authentic self is not enough. You are whole. You have always been whole. You were never actually broken. And everything changes from here. Before you leave this space, write 3 words in the comments. I am whole. This is not just engagement. It is your declaration, your vote for liberation, your signal to others carrying the same spark that they are not alone in this remembering.